In the smoky heart of every medieval village, there was a forge. Could hear it before you saw it, the sharp clink of hammer on anvil ringing out like a war cry. Flames danced behind thick wooden doors. Sparks shot into the air, glowing like fireflies before fading into ash. And at the center of it all stood the blacksmith. Sleeves rolled to the elbows, sweat dripping into the fire. Muscles coiled with strength earned through years of relentless labor. In a world without mass production, blacksmiths were the architects of everyday survival. Their craft was more than mere metalwork. It was the backbone of society. Without blacksmiths, medieval life would have stalled. They built the tools that cultivated the land. They crafted the weapons that defended kingdoms. They forged the nails that held together homes, carts, and ships. Every link in the chain of daily existence quite literally came from their hands. The blacksmith was not a background character in the medieval story. He was essential, respected, and often feared, seen as someone who possessed a kind of elemental magic. To shape iron was to flirt with fire and transform Earth's raw material into civilization itself. The blacksmith's role began in the dirt. Iron ore had to be dug, smelted, and purified. Smelting furnaces were built to reach blistering temperatures. Once the iron was extracted, it had to be hammered, folded, and tempered. This process took patience and an intimate understanding of fire. Too hot, and the metal would weaken. Too cold, and it would resist the hammer. The blacksmith didn't just work with metal, he had a relationship with it. He listened to its language, watched its colors, and understood when it was ready to be molded. It was an art form rooted in necessity. In times of peace, blacksmiths made the world run. They produced plowshares that dug into soil to grow grain for bread. They crafted hoes, rakes, sickles, and scythes. Every farming tool had to come through the forge. Blacksmiths also supplied nails, hinges, locks, keys, and chains. From the hinges on a church door to the chain around a prisoner's ankle, the smith's hand was evident. He built horseshoes that kept animals moving across the kingdom and carts that carried goods to market. Blacksmiths connected every class, from the peasant who needed a rake to the lord who needed an ornate gate. But peace never lasted long. When war came, blacksmiths became the armorers of destiny. They fashioned swords, daggers, axes, and spearheads. Each piece had to be strong enough to withstand battle, yet flexible enough to avoid shattering. Good steel was the difference between life and death. The blacksmith's work would be tested in the chaos of the battlefield. Shields, breastplates, helmets all painstakingly forged. Some smiths specialized in mail, linking thousands of tiny rings to form chain armor. Others were masters of the sword, balancing weight and sharpness to perfection. Knights might win glory, but it was the smith who gave them the means to do it. The connection between warrior and blacksmith was sacred. A knight might commission a sword and name it, imbuing it with spiritual significance. The sword was more than a weapon, it was an identity. And the man who forged it was part of that identity. Some blacksmiths etched blessings or runes into blades, whispered prayers as they worked. There was something deeply mystical about crafting tools for death. The fire was almost a portal, the hammer a ritual instrument. In many villages, the forge itself was believed to hold protective powers. People left offerings near it, or asked the blacksmith for charms against evil. Blacksmiths often lived on the edge of the village, but were never far from its center of power. They were part of the manorial system, sometimes working directly for a noble lord. In towns, blacksmiths could become wealthy members of craft guilds, respected and influential. These guilds maintained standards, trained apprentices, and preserved the secrets of the trade. Becoming a blacksmith was no casual affair. It took years of apprenticeship. Boys began by sweeping the floor and fanning the bellows. Eventually they learned how to shape iron nails, then tools, then weapons. It was a slow climb, full of burnt fingers and aching backs. But the reward was a respected place in society. Despite the respect, the work was unforgiving. For hours every day, blacksmiths stood in suffocating heat, their arms swinging heavy hammers, their eyes squinting against flying sparks. Injuries were common: burns, crushed fingers, and damaged lungs from years of inhaling smoke and soot. The forge was no gentle place. It was a cauldron of fire, labor, and endurance. Yet blacksmiths rarely complained. This was their world, and they owned it. With every blow of the hammer, they transformed something raw and unyielding into something useful. It was a deeply satisfying creation. They also held an unusual amount of independence. In a world where most peasants were tied to land or lord, blacksmiths had a valuable skill that could take them far. A good blacksmith could find work anywhere. He might be summoned by nobles, hired by cities, or even taken on campaign with armies. In many ways, the blacksmith was free in ways others were not. His forge was his kingdom. His tools were his passport. His fire was his strength. Women were not entirely absent from this world either. While rare, some women did take up the hammer, especially as widows of blacksmiths who continued the trade. Though society often resisted female smiths, the need for labor sometimes outweighed custom. These women worked the same hours, faced the same dangers, and forged with the same skill. Their names are mostly lost to history, but their work would have been essential in times of war or plague, when manpower ran thin. As towns grew and trade routes expanded, blacksmiths adapted. They began producing more specialized items: locks for merchants, buckles for tailors, fittings for ships. Some became farriers, focusing solely on horse care. Others made surgical instruments or fine decorative metalwork. The blacksmith's role evolved with the times, always maintaining that central connection to human need. Wherever people needed something strong and durable, something shaped from fire and muscle, the blacksmith was there. Religion also left its mark on the forge. Many blacksmiths kept icons of saints near their anvils, especially Saint Dunstan, the patron saint of blacksmiths in England. Legend told of him nailing a horseshoe to the devil's hoof, causing such pain that the devil promised never to enter a house with a horseshoe above the door. That story traveled far, and even today, a horseshoe over the threshold is a symbol of luck and protection. The idea that the blacksmith could outwit the devil speaks volumes about how society viewed them, not just as craftsmen, but as clever, powerful, and a bit dangerous. By the end of the medieval period, blacksmiths had helped shape a continent. From the tools that fed millions to the weapons that drew blood in countless wars, their handiwork was everywhere. They had built the iron bones of society. Castles rose with their nails. Fields bloomed with their plows. Kingdoms stood or fell with the steel they forged. They were not nobles, knights, or kings, but they were indispensable. Without them, the grand stories of medieval Europe would collapse into silence. Today, we tend to imagine blacksmiths as relics, symbols of a time long gone. But walk into any museum, any ruined castle, or preserved village, and you will see their fingerprints. The iron rings on a portcullis, the hinges on a chapel door, the rusted links of a forgotten chain. These are the echoes of men and women who stood at the edge of fire and shaped the world with their hands. They were the muscle behind the myth, the unseen artisans of the medieval age. So next time you hear the clang of metal or feel the warmth of fire, think of the forge. Think of the sweat and soot, the rhythm of hammer and bellows. Remember the blacksmith, standing alone against the roar of flames, crafting not just iron, but the very foundation of medieval life. Their world was not one of silence and stillness, but of noise, fire, and creation. They were the quiet giants of the Middle Ages, and without them, nothing would have held together. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fiery heart of medieval life. As we have seen, blacksmiths were so much more than just workers at the forge. They were the quiet creators who kept villages running, armies marching, and farms thriving. Their hammers rang out like the pulse of society, shaping not just metal, but the very structure of medieval civilization. Every sword that clashed in battle, every plow that turned the soil, every nail that held a home together, these were all gifts from the forge. In a time without factories or assembly lines, blacksmiths were the lifeline of progress. They blended physical strength with deep knowledge, endured blistering heat, and earned respect in every corner of their world. Their craft lives on in the tools and traditions that still echo through history. If you found this glimpse into the life of a medieval blacksmith fascinating, do not forget to like the video. Share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe for more stories that breathe life into the past. Drop a comment below, and let us know what part of a blacksmith's world surprised you the most. Till next time, keep your curiosity burning bright like the forge.